In a tiny hamlet in the Vale of Glamorgan are the remains of a once great house that has a story to tell. Generations of rich and powerful people lived here. The house, set in lush green countryside, had a great hall, ornate gardens, and even a deer park. One visitor, centuries ago, called it a Welsh Paradise.
Llantrithyd Place had a role to play during the tumultuous years of the civil war of the 1640s between Parliament and the King. In fact, it was confiscated by Parliament, yet, ironically, a few years later, it became a refuge for royalists.
The story of Llantrithyd Place begins in a tiny church alongside its ruins. St. Illtyd's contains a memorial to the family who built the great house. An ornate and gilded altar tomb shows the Bassett family, John ap Thomas Bassett, his wife Alice, and their children, several of whom died in infancy. He was descended from an English family which had evidently become very Welsh. John, an ambitious lawyer, acquired much land and built Llantrithyd Place in 1546. It was a large house for a very wealthy man.
Soon after, another family came on the scene. John had left the house to his daughter Elizabeth, and she married Anthony Mansell from a well-to-do local family, and who was also an MP.
Elizabeth and Anthony also appear on the altar tomb. Of the couple's 5 children, only 2 daughters survived into adulthood, and in 1586, one of them, Mary, married into the family whose name would be associated with Llantrithyd Place for several centuries, the Aubreys. Thomas Aubrey, the son of well-to-do lawyer Dr. William Aubrey, moved into the house. It seems, though, that he had a very difficult relationship with his mother-in-law, including trouble over a lawsuit when he allegedly assaulted one of her servants. But after his in-laws died, Thomas had full control of the large estate. The Aubreys were top of the local social strata. He became High Sheriff of Glamorganshire. Surviving accounts show that Sir Thomas, as he had become, spent a lot of money improving the house and its gardens. A huge new grand gallery was built. Artworks were installed. There were walled gardens. Orchards, including nectarines and cherry trees, were planted. Fish ponds were created. Records still exist of his lavish spending on the house. There was much entertaining of the great and good here. Household accounts show expensive food and drink brought here for that purpose. Musicians and entertainers of various sorts were employed, including professional actors who performed plays. However, Sir Thomas seems to have been unpopular with some, later being described by a contemporary as haughty, unsociable, and a great oppressor of his poor neighbours and sundry others. Sir Thomas died in 1641 on the eve of the civil war between King Charles I and Parliament. His son, also John, was a passionate royalist. In fact, so much so that the king proposed that he should be made a baronet, but the turmoil of war prevented that happening. However, it seems that he decided to be known as Sir John anyway. His loyalty did not stop him from being one of those who met the king at St. Fagans in September 1645 to express the grievances and hardships of local people as the civil war dragged on. This was at a time when Glamorganshire formed its short-lived peaceable army, which tried, in vain, to have a degree of independence from the warring parties.
Parliament punished those gentry who'd been on the losing side in the Civil War. More often than not, those punishments were financial. Llantrithyd Place was confiscated by Parliament, but in 1650, John managed to recover it, and thereafter it became a refuge for churchmen, politicians and academics, royalist sympathisers who had been displaced from their homes and occupations.
At the restoration of the monarchy with Charles II in 1660, John officially got his baronetcy. The family fortunes were on the up again. He died in 1679, and the next Sir John, the second baronet, who was born in 1650, was a cultured man and a patron of the arts. Through marriage he acquired an estate in Buckinghamshire. At first time was split evenly between the two estates, but gradually the family began to drift away from Wales. This Sir John died by falling off his horse in September 1700. An inscription on his memorial at Llantrithyd states, somewhat ambiguously, what he was, those who conversed with him best know.
His widow Mary, whose first husband had died, tended to outlive her husbands. She married twice more in the next 3 years, and her fourth husband, Dr. William Aubrey, was a second cousin of Sir John.
Then came the third baronet, yet another Sir John. He became MP for Cardiff in 1706 and later High Sheriff of Glamorgan. The Llantrithyd property remained with further generations of Aubreys, some living quietly and privately, others becoming distinguished in public life and evidently preferring home to be closer to London than the Vale of Glamorgan. So the house became unwanted and presumably too expensive to maintain. In the early 1800s, it began to slip into ruin. The roof collapsed in 1832, and so it came to be as we see it today. Unfortunately, the glory that was Llantrithyd Place has all but gone. But its story is a reminder of the very rich and influential people who once lived there and of events long ago. And one family name still lives on in the locality.